Ridecell. We power some of the highest utilization mobility services in the world, including those run by BMW, Renault, AAA, and about 20 other car sharing and ride hailing services. And I want to talk to you today about the path to autonomous mobility as a service. A lot of times when I attend talks like this one, they start out with the speaker making a bombastic prediction about the future that is designed almost explicitly to grab headlines. And then, a year later, you go to another talk they do, and there's a new prediction. There's almost no accountability. And so I've often wished that sort of events required speakers to start by talking about how did your last talk do, right? How are the predictions? And so in the vein of practicing what I preach, here's a straight from Twitter, a prediction of mine from 2017. I'm going to read it out. Ridecell CEO Aarjav believes the majority of urban transport will be on-demand, shared, and autonomous by 2023. Talk about a bombastic prediction. So before everyone starts walking out, here's what I really said. By 2023, the majority of transportation in urban cities with temperate weather and organized traffic will be on-demand, shared, and likely autonomous. And I was talking actually about, we had just finished discussing transit, so I was talking about commuting. All this to say that the goal of my talk today is to focus on practical sort of paths from here to where we want to be. Right? There's a lot of marketing around autonomous vehicles, and I think one of the better developments in the last year or so has been that everyone, from startups to the OEMs, have started becoming more realistic about both sort of how we get there and where we are today. But I think at the same time, there's optimism, right? It is not, oh, well, we'll never get there, which is sort of what the climate was maybe 5 years ago, right? About both shared mobility and autonomous mobility. And so, while in my defense, the same year PwC predicted that, a third of all miles traveled by 2030 will be mobility as a service, right? And they predicted that a quarter of all miles traveled will be autonomous by 2030. The real question, in my view, in our view at Ridecell, is not sort of what the number is in terms of percentage of miles traveled or when we end up there. The trillion-dollar question, literally, is how we get there, right? Because there's a lot of, there's so many different things that have to go right for autonomous mobility as a service, particularly shared autonomous mobility as a service to become the norm, that it's going to take a lot of hard work by a lot of people working together. And I think therein lies probably the second development in the last year or so that has been very encouraging. You see competitors like BMW and Daimler working together, Honda and GM, and even some of the leading startups sort of collaborating with the incumbents in this space, right? So in my talk today, I'll try and focus on the practical aspects of how we get there. I'm going to speak for about 10 or 12 minutes about how we get there. And I originally wanted to do questions, but I'm told we can't do questions, so instead I'm going to do FAQ, questions that I get asked sometimes about these areas. So look, I think the consensus on how we get to autonomous mobility as a service is these three buzzwords, right? Connected, is sort of accepted now, and most people agree that we get to autonomous mobility as a service by going through shared, electric, and autonomous. But when we talk about the triple disruption, at Ridecell we believe there's one more important factor that drives the adoption of autonomous mobility as a service, and it's fleets. Now the word fleets is considered boring by the press. The word fleets is not really, certainly not sort of as sexy as the other three, but we think that it is a critical component of how we get from here to where we want to be. And the reason we arrived at this conclusion was by operating a mobility service ourselves, right? Back in 2014, I was running the first ride-hailing service that actually got a permit from the state of California before Uber and Lyft. And one of the partnerships that we happened to create was with DriveNow, which at the time was a small car-sharing service, at least in the United States. As it turns out, at the time, DriveNow had only electric cars, right, Activis, with a range of less than 100 miles. And that single decision of deciding to partner with a car-sharing service so that their cars were available for our ride-hailing drivers to use for a few hours a day was probably the only reason we became the first ride-hailing service to have positive unit economics, right? And this is a big thing. To this day, most mobility services are not profitable in most markets, right? And when we confront the question of how do we get to autonomous mobility as a service, probably the hardest thing is figuring out how we get there and we are profitable, right? Because we can certainly subsidize our way, if we are large enough to get there, but that's really not sustainable, right? So the sustainable mobility as a service requires you to have positive unit economics, and positive unit economics come from fleets. And the reason they come from fleets is because the cost of operation, the cost of maintenance, all of these major costs that drive the cost of running a mobility as a service business are by definition lower for a fleet that is paying B2B prices than an individual owner who is paying consumer prices, right? And so, that really is the beginning of why we believe that fleets are an important component of autonomous mobility as a service. Now let's talk a little bit about electric vehicles, right? Electric vehicles, and you can't see the heart emoji there, but in the middle there's supposed to be a red heart that says electric vehicles love fleets. Look, one of the challenges with the adoption of electric vehicles by consumers has been that people are worried about range anxiety, right? In a recent survey, 58% of respondents said that one reason, probably the main reason they don't buy electric vehicles, is they are worried that they will run out of the charge before they get to their destination. Now this number has improved, right? It has gone down about 10% from the previous survey, but it's still a major issue. Cost is another major issue. Electric vehicles still cost more than internal combustion engine vehicles. But when you think about both of these things, right? The charging, which you need in order to sort of use electric vehicles for long distances, and the cost of the vehicle itself, both of these factors are much easier for a fleet to manage. For example, going back to 2014, right, we had a couple of hundred drivers using an electric car with less than 100-mile range and doing so happily and profitably for all parties involved. And the reason that was possible was because even a car with a 100-mile range in a city like San Francisco, where the average speed is about 20 miles per hour, can drive for 4 hours at peak times, then charge for 5 hours, right, at off-peak times, and drive again for 4 hours, right? And that 8 hours is 33% utilization, right? 33% utilization is a utilization level most car sharing services would kill for, right? So it's easier to manage electric vehicles that are high utilization in shared fleets because charging, is possible even with a low density charger infrastructure, right? And one of the top challenges we have is it's going to take a few years for our cities to have a charger, every mile, like we have gas stations today, right? A second reason is, recently we saw data come out from Tesla. Their first cars used in shared mobility services have driven now between 500,000 and 650,000 kilometers per car, right? So first of all, that's a stunning number by itself. But the interesting thing is that the cost of operation, the cost of maintenance was about 5 US cents per mile, right? Compared to that, the cost of a comparable car, a Lincoln or a Daimler, so Mercedes car is about 20 to 25 cents per mile. And so once again, while the cost of the car is much higher in the beginning, the cost of operation is a fraction. And again, that's an attribute that makes these vehicles much more suited for fleets, right? So we believe fleet charging removes the barriers to wide adoption. And we've seen this play out around the world. One of our customers is Ziti, a car sharing service in Madrid that now has about 650 cars. They started with 500 cars and 6 months in, they published their numbers. With 500 all-electric cars, Renault Zoes, they had 100,000 users, 4 million kilometers, a 25% market share in a market that has 4 or more competitors, and their positioning was premium. In fact, they are, I believe, to this day, the most expensive service in the city, right? And again, right, when you use electric vehicles and shared fleets, with sort of fleet operations, you can get positive unit economics. And this is not isolated to Europe, right? In the United States, in a smaller city, Sacramento, one of our other customers, Gig, is partnered with Electrify America, the Volkswagen initiative, to run a fully electric fleet. BMW, another one of our partners, has electric i3s in almost every city where they run a shared mobility service. And this is sort of how we believe the first step towards an autonomous sort of mobility future horizon, which is you start with shared vehicles, in fleets that are mostly electric. Now, it doesn't stop there, right? If you want to run a profitable mobility as a service business, there's really three other critical components at the very least. The first is understanding and leveraging the connection between fleets and customer retention. Now, these two words don't usually go together, right? When most digital mobility services think about customer retention, they're thinking about user experience. And correctly so, right? The challenge is that user experience is too often thought of just in terms of bits, right? User experience is how good your app is, right? Well, in reality, with mobility as a service, the atoms are just as important as the bits, right? In order for your customers to be satisfied, you need to make sure the cars are in the right place, they're charged or fueled, they're clean, right? And they're there when the customers need them. In fact, for almost all car sharing and certainly ride-hailing services, the difficult part is not the app, right? It's actually getting the car there within the right amount of time, fueled, cleaned, right, and in good shape. And in order to do this, you need good tools for sure, but you need good ecosystem partnerships. You need, in every region around the world, the set of people who will clean your cars, charge your cars are different. Right? Unfortunately, there are no global fleet managers yet, right? And so one of the important things mobility operators have to solve for is how can they, use tools that are fully integrated with these ecosystem partners around the world. That's one of the key things we're focused on, right? So, another thing you need is to build, critical partnerships with the local and regional bodies, right? And this is not just lobbying. This is not just, being friends with the administrators. It's actually providing the cities with the data and the tools that they need to manage and regulate your services, right? In order to operate a car sharing service, a free floating service in a city, you need parking, right? You're asking the city to basically give you the right to park almost anywhere. That's a huge deal. In order to do that, the cities typically need you to give them real-time information on where your vehicles are. You need a way to automatically, pay the city based on your usage. And these tools are anything but simple, right? So, we have seen in the last year these factors become more and more important. In San Francisco, just as the scooter revolution was taking off in 2018, all of the top 4 scooter companies failed to secure a license in San Francisco. Instead, the 2 companies that secured a license were relatively small companies that built better tools and better partnerships with cities. Right? Again, in San Francisco, another customer of ours became the first company to get a free floating permit early this year, in part by building that partnership and the tools. Right? So so we have spoken about the importance of shared fleets using the right tools to use electric vehicles so that the cost of operation is low. How do we get from here to autonomous, right? Certainly autonomous ride-hailing is this marriage of car sharing and ride-sharing, right? And I say that because in autonomous ride-hailing there is no driver in the car that's going to fuel the car or maintain the car for you, right? Every Uber driver automatically is also a maintenance person who is in the car, right? And so Uber gets the advantage of free labor in every single car that is driving on Uber, in order to take care of the car. Well, the moment that car is autonomous, you have no longer free labor, right? So if the car is a challenge, you need to, find someone to go there, and that's a very expensive proposition, right? So one of the things that we have come to believe is that in order for autonomous ride-hailing to be a reality, there's an intermediate step, and that step is the car being autonomous while being in car sharing mode. What if our cars, while empty, could drive themselves to a maintenance station, to a fueling station, to a car wash? Now, this is possible at low speeds, right? If you want to move a car to a fueling station at 2 o'clock at night, you don't have to drive at 50 miles per hour, right? If you want to take a car to a higher demand location, you can do it at 10 miles per hour at 2 o'clock at night. And it's amazing how much value there is in moving a car 1 kilometer from a low demand location to a high demand location. And so at Ridecell, we are focused on near-term use cases, low-speed use cases in urban areas that are level 4 and that in the beginning do not require passengers. And all of these things make it possible to use autonomy at a lower cost. You don't have to use the most expensive sensors. And it really gives you the ability to test autonomy in the real world. Because look, it's relatively easy, although expensive, to test an autonomous vehicle with Velodyne 128s, with a driver inside, right? But it's questionable how much real world experience that is getting you, right? And so in our view, some of the first services, the applications of autonomy will be where the car does not have a passenger, right? And we'll certainly progress from there to autonomous vehicles. And to that end, in 2017 we acquired one of our partners, Aarjav, who was one of the first companies to run a mobility service in a private campus. And at Aarjav we are focused on a model where we are sharing data openly with our partners, because we're B2B, where we are focusing on near-term use cases, where we are focusing on an empty car, right? Sort of going from one place to another, and we are focusing on making that practically useful for shared fleets, right? Now, the reason this matters is because when you look at the cost of operation, and this is real data from across the installations we have seen. When you look at the cost of operating a mobility service, right? Unsurprisingly, the largest one is marketing. But perhaps surprisingly, the combination of cleaning, fleet services, staff, fueling, and maintenance is also 24%. So the cost of operations of a shared fleet rivals the cost of marketing, right? And if low-cost autonomous sensors and technology can reduce this cost by not requiring a person to take the car from A to B, that would be a huge accelerator for shared fleets, right? So at Ridecell, while we are known for our ride-hailing platform and our car-sharing platform, which are important tools, most of our customers use, one of the key areas of R&D where we create value is our active fleet management tool, right? The tool that allows you to sustainably manage shared operations. And our toolkit extends from apps and APIs to fleet management, demand supply management, operations, vehicle integration, vendor management, compliance. This is sometimes to some of our partners in the beginning this seems too broad, but the reality is that if all you have is an app and a car that can lock and unlock itself, you don't have a car sharing service, right? You have a science experiment. In order to really run a business at scale across multiple cities, you need a set of tools that work together to make your operations seamless. And to that end, right, we focus on tools that can be used with any car sharing or ride-hailing platform, right? Your own, someone else's, in order to solve problems in fleet management, risk management, and growth, right? We are fundamentally providing a toolkit where our customers can use a few tools or all of them together. So, over the last year, we've been able to scale, to operate in about 3 different continents. Our largest presence is in Europe, with operations in 4 countries, and we have launched over 20 customers, running different kinds of mobility services with support in our B round from some of the top investors in Europe, including Deutsche Bahn, BMW Ventures, Munich Re, and BNP Paribas. Some of them are in the room. But as I look towards how I see the world develop, right, I'll hazard to make an updated prediction. I think over the last year in cities around the world, we have seen a push for electrification. In Madrid, the city has basically stopped allowing anything but zero-emission vehicles in many parts of the city. But what's interesting is it's uniform. It's not just Madrid, it's not just Paris or London, it's even New Delhi, right? And I think we're in an interesting time where this may seem like an obstacle to if you look at it from the point of view of the old world, but it's really an opportunity, right? I think if we adopt electric vehicles and shared fleets and focus on deploying them, with near-term real-world applications of autonomy, we have the possibility of making this prediction tool. So instead of calling this a prediction, I'm going to call this a call to action, right? The people here in this room working together can really make it possible by 2023 for a majority of non-transit use cases of mobility in major urban markets to be shared, electric, and autonomous. And I think it really will take a coalition, right? I think the last year has shown that even the largest OEMs, even Google with all their cash, cannot go it alone, right? This is not an area where one company can create all of the solutions. It's important to create partnerships. It's important to find the right tools from across our ecosystem. And certainly it's important to build some of your core competencies. I think it's absolutely crucial that you own whatever is your strategic core. But I think the coalitions that are powered by software that connects them are really going to win in this, what really still is a race, right, to an autonomous mobility as a service future. So that's really all I wanted to present. I think how much time do I have left? About 40 seconds? Maybe 2 minutes. 2 minutes. So since I'm not allowed to take questions, I'll talk about a couple of different things that are that come up, right, in this area. A lot of people talk about machine learning and about better software. and there's both optimism and skepticism about sort of these set of tools, right? So one of the things that we have found to be useful across our customer bases is the idea of combining data with operations, right? Too many mobility operators are using machine learning for predicting demand, but are not really thinking about operations. And I think it's really critical to say, here's where the demand is, but here is where I need the cars to come from when I move the cars. And some of our most successful customers have gotten 50% of their operational tasks, being done by consumers, and reduce their cost of moving cars from 50%, for example, by combining, sort of their demand prediction with their operational tools. And so, if there's sort of one theme I would ask you guys to look at for 2019, it is how can you bring operations into the fold and make it a first-class citizen of running your mobility services? Because we're only going to make these high utilization, profitable mobility services work if we look at the entire spectrum of problems, not just the sexy parts. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.